Welcome to Shooting Spaces, a real estate photography podcast. Discussions on gear, technique, industry news, and interviews with the best in the business. Now, here are your hosts, Rich Baum and Brian Berkowitz.
Welcome to Shooting Spaces, a real estate photography podcast. This is Rich Baum in Sacramento, California.
And Brian Berkowitz in New York.
And we want to welcome you to this week's episode of our podcast, and welcome everybody. And as we always do, just asking, I know what Brian's going to say he's been busy doing. It's unfortunately not photography related, but what's going on, Brian?
Yeah, busy. I mean, today is my first day off in probably 3 weeks, and I purposely didn't book any shoots because as I've said before, I moved last week, so I'm just trying to catch up on a lot of the housework around the house, which is, I guess, work.
And what's the specific chore you're doing right now?
I'm putting up blinds. Yes, exciting.
Well,
I got a text from Rich in the middle of putting up blinds saying it's time to record, so I had to run downstairs, and here we are.
Yes, and we're really excited about this week. What do we got for our guest this week, Brian?
We have an interview with, as you nicely put it, a hack photographer.
Oh, great. Oh.
Yes. And that photographer is the one and only Rich Baum. And the reason we call it an interview is because, as you mentioned, you've got a lot of questions and I guess comments lately about your switch from Nikon to Sony. So we figured, hey, why not come in and talk about it? Maybe interview style, allow me to interview you about your switch and your thoughts behind it, your philosophy behind you switching, and see where it goes from there.
Great. Well, I got plenty of stuff to talk about. And I have been getting at least a dozen people have sent me messages saying, why don't you do a podcast on the what made me switch or why I switched, what do I think about, the pros and cons. And I think there's great opportunity. So, Mr. Berkowitz, why don't you take it away?
Yes, I'd like to introduce everyone to Rich Baum. Rich, why don't you tell everyone, your website and a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm just a photographer in Sacramento, California. I'm trying to get into this business, and it's not easy. And I've been trying to learn everything I can, and I found that it's really important to have a really good camera. So I heard Sony is good, and that's where I went.
There we go. All right. Enough of the cheesy humor.
Yeah.
Anyhow, okay. So let's get to it. Now, I know you've obviously been shooting Nikon DSLR for years and years and years. And
40 plus years.
40 plus. So decades, not even years,
yeah.
Decades. Almost half a century, if you want to look at it that way. But I know you've had your trouble with Nikon, as you've eloquently expressed all over the internet many times. But all the while shooting Nikon, you did have a Sony, I think A7III or...
Correct, yeah.
So you were shooting Sony while you were shooting Nikon at the same time. Exactly. So you've been shooting Sony for a little while before you obviously just recently made the full switch. Before we talk about the full switch, what 2 years ago brought you to decide, hey, I've been shooting Nikon for 40 years, but let me try this thing out?
Well, I just want to start by saying, for the people that don't know, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people that don't know. I was just unhappy with Nikon because I had a lot of recall issues, as many people have with the D750. I had a shutter go out at 40,000 actuations on a big job in a foreign country. I then had to deal with multiple recalls and multiple issues with Nikon. And I was having a lot of trouble with dealing with Nikon, the company. So it wasn't only the equipment for me. And I know a lot of people have not had issues with Nikon, and that's great. I'm very happy for them. But for me, I was like the poster child. And then I got a D500, and I used that for sports, crop sensors for sports. And I started having issues with that. And then I've just been dealing with Nikon for so many months over the last 4 years that I was excited when Wayne Capelli, or it might be Wayne Capelli. I heard somebody pronounce his name that way, but Wayne got into Sony and started telling people about it, and it looked really interesting. And I found a Sony A6000, a little mirrorless that was open box for $345. And then I got the Samyang 12 millimeter. And till this day, from 2.5 years ago till today, I'm still using it for about 60% of my real estate photography. And I just find it to be such an enjoyable camera. But then I learned what I really value in the mirrorless camera, and that started off being an electronic viewfinder, or EVF. And for the people that understand and have used EVFs, it's a remarkable thing. It's just a wonderful tool. And it takes a little while getting used to it, but I fell in love with EVF. And, the A6000 was a good camera, but it's by no means something I would use on almost any other professional shoot except real estate, mainly because the ISO performance is very poor on it, which the D750 Nikons, I love their ISO performance up to, 16,000, no problem. ISO 16,000, you can get usable professional shots off of for my sports and my real high-end stuff. But the A6000 is just great for real estate. So I'd been looking forward to a full frame Sony that would have good ISO performance. And also, at the time, about a year ago, when I kind of switched to Fuji, and that didn't go real well. So I sold everything and returned everything that I bought for Fuji. But I found that Sony came out with a new camera, the A7III, just about February, I think. And I said, that's in the ballpark for me price-wise. And I took a leap of faith and went with the A7III. So I got an A6000 and an A7III now.
Well, what was your driving force at the start to give mirrorless an attempt? Especially 2 years ago, the mirrorless hype wasn't what it was or what it is now, especially in the photography community. But 2 years ago, obviously, I'm not talking about 10 years ago or 8 years ago. 2 years ago, mirrorless was out, and Sony's been out and producing cameras for a while at that point, even. But you almost had to take a little bit of a leap of faith to say, hey, I want to see if I can go and shoot mirrorless professionally.
Well, I realized with the A6000 the value of the electronic viewfinder. So I didn't have to take a leap of faith there. I knew that I would want to shoot a mirrorless camera professionally. My problem was the only camera that really seemed to have the focusing I could really use for weddings, low light, for sports. And I never even thought I'd be using this for sports, but I really am loving it in sports. But I just felt that only the A9 at about $4,600 was the only body available, and I wasn't going to drop $4,600. I've never been the guy that buys the D4S, the D5 Nikon. I've always been a prosumer guy, and I just found that I wasn't able to do it because I also was going to have to spend a lot of money on professional lenses. And that A7 III, I started with the 85 millimeter 1.8, and that was like $550 for me. And it just blew my socks off. And it allowed me to really play with the camera. And then it allowed me to get firsthand feedback on not only its unbelievable ISO performance, it ups and betters the D750, but it is just the focusing. Sony has got it, man. Sony has got the focusing.
I mean, it's interesting you say that because as I've mentioned to you before, and I think I've mentioned this on an episode before, about 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, I was looking to buy a mirrorless and try mirrorless. And as you know, I shoot Canon. And I actually went out and I bought the A7 II. And I wasn't looking for a mirrorless to shoot professional, but more so just to have, a personal camera around the house to shoot and go that route. I wasn't even thinking professionally at that point. I was using the Canon Mark III at that point. So I said, hey, let me go out and buy, and I bought, I think, a used A7 II, which I don't like to normally buy used bodies, but I figured it was just for my personal use, so it was okay. And what I found, I also tried 2 different adapters for my Canon lenses. I had the Metabones one, and I also had the Sigma one. I tried both, and what I found was with the Canon lenses to the A7 II, because you're mentioning focusing, the focus was just not quick enough for me.
I think it's partially the body too, not just the adapter.
Yeah, so I think it has to do with the body, the adapters. Now, the Metabones was quicker than the Sigma for sure, and the Canon lenses and that whole, combination. Now, obviously, if I was shooting the A7 II on a professional real estate shoot, it wouldn't have made much of a difference because I'm usually manual focusing.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't have had an effect. But, if I'm shooting my kids running around the park, that extra second or 2 seconds will make a big difference for me. So I didn't like it. I resold it. And at the time, Canon just came out with their M5, their mirrorless, or their best mirrorless to date. Call it whatever you want. So I went and bought that. It has the same sensor as the 80D. So there's a good sensor in there. And I actually keep that now in my camera case as my backup. So because it has the 80D sensor, I can produce professional enough results with it if I need to. And I have shot for fun with it on shoots just to test it out. I've never actually had a professional shoot done with it. But, using that Canon with my Canon lenses, it's just like putting a regular Canon lens in a Canon DSLR, the speed as far. There's no delay or anything like that. So, I'm not saying obviously the Canon mirrorless is better than the Sony, because it definitely isn't, or yet until they come out with their own. And who knows at that point what's going to happen. But I've been, fairly happy with the M5 for what I need it for either a backup in my camera case or just around the house shooting.
Well, I certainly would like to touch upon adapters, because I have 2 adapters and I've played around for the last 3 months with them. And I have found that my decision was, and I'm glad I did it, I have now gone to all native Sony glass because of even, in good light, the adapters are working okay. But I got to go more into that. But in a wedding situation, in a very important situation, in very adverse lighting conditions, I cannot depend upon, even if I was to use Canon, I've had enough feedback that I don't think I would be satisfied 100% in low light with an adapter. So I got the, I know that, and I found, I had a lot of research regarding trying to adapt Nikon lenses to Sony cameras. And until now, there was no way to really get autofocus with Nikon lenses through a Sony with an adapter, even a Metabones adapter. It just was very, very bad and much worse than Canon. But I found a review and I ended up getting a Calm Light, and we can put the information in the show notes. But the Calm Light adapter I got will adapt Nikon lenses. And for outdoors, I was actually really pleasantly surprised how well it worked. And it worked with I tried some sports with the 70-200 and some wide angle stuff in 24-70, and it worked really, really well. But I found that there were instances that it just did not live up to what I would need or what I would feel comfortable with. So I got the Sony glass, and I got to tell you, I'm just blown away, especially with the top of the line G Master lenses. I always thought it was funny when someone I know would keep going, "Oh, Sony 7200 G Master." I'm like, what is with the G Master? Well, it's just a way of identifying. It's kind of like a Canon red label.
Canon L series, exactly.
And the G Master, I was shooting my 85-1.8 at a wedding, and my focusing was lacking during the reception. It was just not nailing it. I then put on the 2470 G Master, and it was phenomenal with autofocus. But going back into the adapter, I want to say I got and actually went from Nikon 19mm tilt shift to the Canon 17mm, and I got the Sigma MC11 adapter. And yes, we are just doing manual focus, but I am so happy with that combination on that camera. So I have no problem with adapters. But honestly, I think that even though you can use adapters, if you're going to be shooting sports, weddings, or really low light, really important stuff, I do believe, and from all my research and talking to people, I do believe native Sony glass is the way to go. The Canon with the Metabones might be good 80 to 90% of the time, but that 10% of the time, I'll lose my job. So.
Sure, especially when you're shooting sports and weddings where that half a second or a quarter of a second even makes a difference. You can't mess around. You need to be, right on point. And that's where I think having the native lenses, and I've used Sony, I don't know if you remember, we had Vivek Reyes on a couple months ago. So I've used his native Sony glass on his mirrorless. And yeah, it is definitely fast and it's quick. And that quarter of a second that you might lose makes a big difference when you're shooting a wedding or sports. Like you said, it doesn't matter for real estate because no one's going anywhere.
Yeah. And I want to add too that I have been known to say, I probably said it in public, that I shoot professional sports and I shoot Spartan races. I shoot all kinds of things. And I was saying that, I'll go to Sony. I was going to say I will go to Fuji, but then I said I'll go to Sony and I'll use it for everything except sports. I will still be Nikon. Well, I'll be honest with you. The A7III has blown my mind. I shot a swim meet on Saturday and Sunday, and my Nikon, the D500 I got about 70% keepers. Well, swimming is very difficult because you have water in front of the subject. So it's very difficult for the camera to think of how to go through and what to focus on. I got 95% keepers with the Sony and the 85 1.8. And it has a thing called eye follow focus. And other cameras also, Nikon sort of has that. And it also has like 3D mode. It's a joke. And the Sony eye follow focus is absolutely amazing. It works. It stays on the eye closest to the camera, and it will follow the eye in and out, back and forth, and it's just amazing. It's a game changer for like weddings and things like that. But you're 100% right. My A6000 is fine for real estate photography. I do not need an A7III, although I really like it. But the A6000, aside from a noise issue, there's really not much difference between the two cameras, in my opinion.
Awesome. Well, you're not an official Sony only user until you sell your Nikon stuff.
I'm selling a body tonight, D750, okay. And somebody's getting a great deal on a body. And then I have about 4 more bodies and a bunch of lenses, but I'll see. I still have to shoot Nikon for the rest of the year with my Spartan races because we can't go there yet. But I am really excited about the switchover, really looking forward to it. And the Nikon gear absolutely will go. I fully committed. I just received the Sony 70-200 2.8 G Master this week, and I am absolutely loving it. It's heavy and big like all 70-200s, but it is a joy. I'm really, really happy with that lens. The 24-70 is just it is so much sharper than anything I've ever shot with Nikon. The 85 1.8. I'm blown away. It's almost too sharp. You start seeing the pores of the bride, the face pores and the makeup. And it's just, oh my gosh. But I'll take that.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this, because me personally, I'm kind of at a crossroads. I'm shooting with the Canon Mark IV, and it's a great camera. And I've been toying the last few months heavily with going mirrorless. And I'm kind of at a crossroads because I'm so heavily invested in Canon. I have, I think, eight Canon lenses, 2 bodies, and then the mirrorless. And I know, Canon's supposedly coming out with a full frame mirrorless. I guess the end of this year or early next year, which everyone's laughing about. But I don't know why. To be honest, because who knows? That's a different conversation. Maybe we can have in a few minutes. But what besides the EVF, and as I've mentioned before, I have a bit of a video production background. So, and when you're shooting video, obviously people that do shoot video now know this. You see what's on your screen is what you're getting, which is very similar to what an EVF brings you, as opposed to a DSLR where everything just looks beautiful in your viewfinder, and that's not what the image looks like. So besides for the EVF, which is
Right.
obviously a huge factor, but I'm very used to that. It's not a learning curve because of the video I've been shooting. What are the other major factors that might sway me to say, all right, I might have to consider this sooner than maybe even potentially waiting for Canons to come out?
I mean, honestly, the only reason I'm not waiting for the Nikon, there's a couple of reasons, but it was time for me to leave Nikon. So that just takes Nikon out of the equation, which actually made my life a lot easier.
Sure, but you had issues with Nikon.
Yeah,
itself.
No, I'm saying
that's a different
right.
story.
No, I'm just saying for me, if I wasn't having issues with Nikon, there might be a very good chance I would wait for Nikon to come out with the mirrorless, because they're coming out next year with one, or by the end of this year. My problem is that new cameras have just been having issues, and I'll be honest, I think Nikon and Canon will get it together mirrorless wise, but I think it's going to take a few generations to really get their act together. And I really believe that Sony has had time. There are very few downsides, in my opinion, to Sony. There are some negatives, but a lot of pros. Canon and Nikon, I just can't even imagine until they come out. I'm not going to say they're not going to be great. And it would be a great thing if you could get native speed with a native Canon adapter, then yes, that would be fantastic. But I don't think anybody will know until it's actually put through its paces.
Sure, and I'm going to play devil's advocate for a minute, because obviously I'm heavily invested in Canon. I also have a C100 Mark II, which, if most people are not familiar with, that's a strictly a video camera, a Canon video camera, which puts on the native Canon EF mount
it's
lenses.
It's that square kind of boxy camera, right?
Exactly. So I guess if I include that, I have 4 bodies. But that's what you said. No one wants to jump on the bandwagon with Canon or Nikon on their first generation mirrorless. Yeah. I don't know much about Nikon because I'm a Canon guy. But to play devil's advocate, I will say this. Obviously, they do have the M5 and a couple of other M series. So they do have some mirrorless, nothing on
you can't, no, you we don't even need to discuss it. It's not even any Sony camera before the A9 or the A7R III or the A7III, no need to even discuss with me.
Of course. But what I will say is this, Canon's been producing cameras for 100 years. I don't think they're going to release a camera that's not equivalent or up to the standard of the A7III or better.
No, I think
I can't imagine they're doing that. And I don't think first generation for a company like Canon or Nikon make a difference at that point.
I don't know, man. I'm again, I'm going back to Nikon. I'm so disappointed. I've had so many issues. They brought me so much hardship and disappointment, not only with my gear, but dealing with the company. So I can't even go there. But let me just say this, because I can't really go into Canon because I'm not a Canon shooter, except for my tilt shift. But I will say, let me just point out a few things that mirrorless has. And this would be for almost any mirrorless. One thing it has is called silent shooting, electronic shutter.
Sure. I've used it on the Sony. It's great.
It is a game changer for weddings. It is mainly for me. I'm always self-conscious of shooting and the shutter. And Canon was always less noise than Nikon, and then Nikon got less noise than Canon. But still, the electronic shutter is fantastic. Obviously, as we discussed, the EVF is a game changer. And people have live view on their DSLRs, but live view is not the same, and it doesn't work the same.
Sure. And I use live view very often, probably 70 to 80% of my, like any shoot that I don't have my camera in, I'm shooting in live view 100%. Yeah. That's the way I do it.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's definitely not the same. But.
And as far as, one thing I was surprised to find out, anybody thinking of going professional with Sony and planning on getting professional lenses, if you're going to get professional zooms like 24-70, 70 to 200, and the A7 III, you're not going to really save any weight. It's not lighter. It is a little bit smaller. And for me, I don't mind the smaller size because I actually always loved the D750 because it was a smaller grip. But for those people that have bigger hands and find that the Sony mirrorless are smaller or too small for them, you can add on a battery grip, or also they make these little add-on grips, not grips, but they're additions you screw onto the bottom of the body, and it gives you another inch or so on your right-hand side where your pinky would not hit the body of the camera. It's hard to understand unless you're doing it. But so I think you can really get used to the size of it. As far as all the other things, I think one of the big things I love, and now Nikon, you can program a lot of buttons on Nikon, but Sony, and it's one thing I did like about Fuji, it was really customizable, and they had so many buttons you could program. And like the Sony A7 III, so many buttons you can program, but the hard part is remembering what you programmed. So my memory has, over the last 3 months, my muscle memory and my button memory has worked pretty well. So I'm pretty fluent in the camera, but I will say that the menu system, Fuji was much better and Nikon's much better. The menu system in the Sony, the A6000 is no problem, but the menu system in the A7 III is absolutely out of control. It can take you 15 minutes to find what you want. So I really recommend anybody using one really needs to spend some time with it. I spent time on videos. I probably watched 100 YouTube videos trying to really understand the camera. So.
Yeah, there's this. I think that's just because there's so many features. I bought the Mark IV, the Canon Mark IV, I guess 4 months ago now,
Mm-hmm.
and compared to the Mark III, the menu system is also probably double. Just learning where everything is, and I probably don't even use all the features. I mean, I know no one uses all the features in their camera, but just learning where everything is. Yeah,
I know every feature, and I can honestly say I know every feature in my camera now. But that's my job; I have to. And when I teach my workshops, I find that people seem to feel that they really understand their cameras. But I'll be honest with you, most of the people don't really understand their cameras. And when new things come up and we want to try doing different things, they don't know how to find it. So I really recommend spending the time really understanding your camera. It's so many opportunities, but unless you really understand it, you're missing out. So
I hear. And what are your thoughts on the image quality of the A7 III? I mean, have you ever, what is it, like 25 megapixels, something like that?
Yeah, 24 something.
So have you ever, I mean, I know we're doing mostly real estate, but for something like weddings or sports, have you ever found that haven't yet that it's not enough for you, or?
Oh no. You know what? For sports, I would like to be able to heavily crop, but I can't shoot sports with high ISO. I mean, high resolution cameras, mainly because the high resolution generally affects the ISO performance, and also it can slow down the I'm shooting, if I had the A9, I would literally shoot on 20 frames per second all the time when I'm shooting sports. I shot this weekend on 10 frames a second, and that was more than enough, but I could use more. But I will say that I just think that the Sony, the 24 megapixel is really the sweet spot for me. And as far as image quality, the things I'm getting out of my Sonys are way the best keeper rate I've ever had. Everything is in focus, like 98% of shots are in focus. We're talking, again, sports or, real estate, I'm not even discussing. So I have incredible focusing. I have incredible ISO. I have incredible, it is so sharp. It's just amazing. I will say I'm struggling with the colors of the Sony, and I'm actually right now, I may start trying Capture One instead of Lightroom because supposedly it works better with the colors, but the Sony colors are a little bit off. I think everybody knows that Canon has about the best colors, skin tones. Also, Canon, has some other really great benefits to it, to what they do, like video wise. I mean, it's well known that Canon is a better video camera than any Sony camera, but I don't shoot video, so I'm not really the one to talk about that. But as far as the A7 III, I find that it's just beautiful and it is really nice. And I know that they will, if there's enough people having trouble, they will eventually come out with a firmware update to fix the colors of Sony, but that has yet to be seen. And I'm going to work on some profiles in Lightroom to try and mitigate I can't even put my finger on what the weird colors are. It's almost like a green cast, a yellow or a green cast, but I haven't gone there yet, and I'm not worried about it, and it's not going to be a game changer. So.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't really know the Sonys, but I know on my Canons, for instance, when you're shooting, you can customize your color profile in camera.
But that's only for JPEG. That doesn't do anything for RAW.
No, I do that with RAW. And then if you're getting a little bit of a green cast, it'll shoot everything. You can, take the green down and add a little magenta, and but shots will come out a little less green. Honestly,
though, I mean, I've always just, unless I'm shooting JPEG, when I'm shooting RAW, I always keep it just on auto white balance. And even when you're shooting a twilight and all of a sudden everything turns blue, it doesn't bother me because I know I will fix it in Lightroom. So it's more for me. I'm just having trouble getting my hands around how to work with the files in Lightroom. And yeah, but you can absolutely do different color profiles and things like that. It's just not my cup of tea.
What about the dynamic range? How much pull do you have if you're overexposed or significantly underexposed? I
have not tested that yet. I did shoot a twilight last night, and I shot it side by side with the A6000. I was very, very pleased. It's just beautiful. It's just really nice, and it makes me feel good. That's the main thing about this whole change. I'm really excited about the future. It's going to give me a big boost. Again, I've been bummed with Nikon, but besides that, I'm really excited about the mirrorless. I'm really excited about Sony. I'm just really, really looking forward to the future.
Well, you know what it is, and I think any change in the way you create your art or work kind of rejuvenates you. So even if it's something as simple as changing your camera manufacturer, I don't want to say it's like starting over again, but you're challenged to, create this new work with this new equipment you have, and I don't really paint or draw, but I equate it to a painter who gets a completely new set of brushes, and, he wants to go out and just use them all the time,
Well, there's certainly things I'm going to miss about the D750. I always said when my D750 is working good, it's great. But man, it just has failed me too many times. So, I'm looking forward to it. And please understand, I mean, I'm Nikon Professional Services, which I also had issues with. I have a horror story. I sent in 2 bodies to get, for recalls and to get fixed under warranty. And then I sent in a lens to get recalibrated. They sent them back in 3 separate boxes in 3 separate shipments, and they sent me I got a bill from UPS for $400 for shipping. I just about poo-pooed in my pants. I got on the phone with MPFs, started arguing with the guy, and he's like, no, we had to do it this way, that way. He wrote me back with an apology and said, we'll refund all that money on there. I'm just like, you guys, how can you do what you do? How can you do that? They rushed it overnight too. Anyway, I don't want to go into go into Nikon, but I might have trouble with Sony, and I think everybody's experiences are different. So it's not one thing. Rich has a bad time with Nikon. Doesn't mean anything to anybody else. That's just me. But I think that Sony might have. I've heard there's not nearly as much company, backing you up, having as much support. But I will find out. I will eventually be on the Sony professional list, but I have to get a second body. So,
yeah, I mean, what I fear for your standpoint from that, and I could be completely off, and I'm just theorizing here, if that's a word. But remember that Sony, Canon and Nikon are camera manufacturers, camera and lenses. Sony is not. I mean, they do produce cameras and lenses, but they're electronic manufacturers. So they also produce televisions, and they produce headphones, and they produce
all the sensors in Nikon cameras, though.
That they do, yeah. But you understand what I'm saying?
I understand.
So whereas your Nikon Professional Services or Canon Professional Services, they're helping older people that either have a camera or a lens or a printer. I think that's pretty much sums it up as far as what Canon produces. Sony customer support is also dealing with people whose TV broke or whose sound system is breaking down. So unless they decide, and maybe they have this, I don't even know, that they're gonna, try to compete on a customer service level, even their camera professional level with a Canon or
I bet they will.
Nikon. Yes, they're gonna have to not have a customer service that's just dedicated to all of Sony, but literally just for their cameras and lenses and for their professional photography.
And I want to throw one thing in here too. This is just the theory and scuttlebutt that goes around the internet. And as we all know, the internet, everything on the internet is real. But a lot of people feel, it's really interesting. The A7 III has the almost exact same focus system as the A9, the flagship camera, at over twice the price. Why would they do that? Well, we've kind of decided that Sony knows that Nikon and Canon are coming out with mirrorless. Sony has the mirrorless market, no question, over Pentax, over Olympus, over everything. Now, what I think they're doing, and I think they priced it, the A7 III is $2,000. That's an incredible value. But what I think they did is, I think they want everybody, as many people as possible, to jump ship before the Nikon and Canon world comes in to ruin their little game here. But I think that that will also bring a need to support and to be up there with Nikon and Canon. And, I think too, though, that Sony's been in the game a long time with, all kinds of electronics, but I've always used Sony video cameras, and I believe in the company. And I think that for Nikon, I think part of the problem was, and it was just my opinion, ever since the earthquake and the tsunami, I just don't think Nikon ever got their act together again. And their company has been fragmented and is disjointed. So I feel like I don't know how Sony could do worse to me. So it's not a deal breaker. And I might be interviewed in 6 months after my camera breaks and I have a terrible experience with Sony. But right now I'm gonna look at it optimistically.
Okay, good. Look, as long as you're happy and it's producing results that you're happy with and you enjoy using it, then and you're getting work.
And I want to tell everybody I'm loving the Canon 17mm tilt shift. I'm just on the MC11 adapter, which I got for like $140 or something. And okay, it's manual, but I love the 17 millimeters. I can't believe how much I like it more than the 19. And I felt that the 19 was too wide for me, but the 19 Nikon tilt shift. But I just really enjoy. I like the way it feels. I like the way it works. I like the lens hood. I like everything about the 17 millimeters. So it's a welcome addition to my new world. I'm just digging it. So
nice. That's my next item on my list. I actually do not have the 17. I have the 24 I shoot with, but I need to go wider. I have a 16-35-2.8, but I need to bite the bullet and get the 17.
Well, I'll tell you, I've got here's to my friend Sam, Mr. Chen. You were right. Okay. Anyway, no, I love it. And
Sam's okay.
But I will still be keeping my adapter, my Nikon adapter, and my Nikon 24 millimeter tilt shift, because I don't think I need to spend. I don't use it enough to spend the money on a dedicated 24 millimeters Canon tilt shift. So I'm just going to stay with Nikon for that. So I might keep that. But the Canon's great, and I used it all day yesterday, and it's really fun to use. Enjoying it.
All right, awesome. Well, I know we're running low on time, but thank you for coming on, Rich.
Kill two birds with one stone, I figure.
Hey, why not? But it was good chatting with you, and definitely sharing your insight. And look, at this point for me, I'm just waiting till Canon releases theirs before I decide which way I want to go mirrorless, because
absolutely,
I feel like if I go Sony now, I'm not being fair to myself to see what they're going to offer, especially since it's only a few months away at this point, and I'm so heavily invested. I might as well see what they have before I decide, hey, I'm going to either go Canon and, as people all over the internet are putting it, be the guinea pig, or try a first generation, or go a different route and go.
No, I think it's the future, and it's very exciting. But I'm with you. I think that there's no reason why you shouldn't. And no, I don't think there's any reason anybody needs to jump on the mirrorless bandwagon. I just think that for me, it's the right decision and the right time. I think that Canon's and Nikon are both going to probably be gunning for the price point of the A7III, the $2,000 price point. And we'll see how it goes, see what happens. One thing is, if you have a lot of glass and if you're a sports shooter with a 400 millimeter Canon lens or a Nikon, a $10,000 lens, you're not going to want to go mirrorless and not be able to use that. So I can think that it is for some people and not for others. But eventually, I can't imagine that everybody won't be doing mirrorless. I just think the future is really, really, really cool.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm. And I want to say that I will be doing some, if I can ever get my act together and not be so busy, I'm going to try and start doing some videos on my YouTube channel regarding the Sony and my switch and the different lenses and get a little more detail into it. So stay tuned for that.
Awesome. Exciting stuff coming up,
Yeah,
Rich.
We have some really exciting stuff coming up. Really, really, it's a fun time right now. I'm really looking forward to it. And I'm so happy we got together to do this because the feedback from people has been great. And I know you and I both appreciate it so much. And I want to thank everybody. I'm going to cut out here. I just want to say thank you all for listening. And again, be sure to use the Ask the Guys. We don't get enough people to use the Ask the Guys. You can promote your website and we'll get a professional, one of us or one of the top professionals in the business to listen to the Ask the Guys question, and we'll answer it for you on a podcast.
Yeah, maybe that's what we have to start doing as incentive for people to submit questions. It's get additional third people on the podcast with us to help answer the question.
Oh, absolutely! I think it's a great idea. Definitely.
All right, Rich.
Okay. I have a great time in New York. I'm going to stay here in the smoky California where I think we've got 14 major wildfires going on. So see how it goes.
I was watching the news about
and
that.
It's really making for tough photography. Although it is kind of like shooting on an overcast day. So the interiors have been much easier with the diffusion in the sky. So
sure. Well, we've had a lot of rain here the last few days. So it's similar with the overcast.
Okay.
All right, Rich.
Okay, Brian. Thanks a lot. Right. And we will all hear you and talk to you later on the next podcast of Shooting Spaces.
This has been Shooting Spaces, a real estate photography podcast. Subscribe to this show and don't forget to leave us a review. You can also follow Rich and Brian on social media and at their website, shootingspacespodcast.com.